Hello, my name is Julia Volkman, and I'm here to give you a quick tour of mind, brain, and education. Put on your seatbelts, it's going to be quick. You'll get in 26 minutes what I've taken 6 years to study and learn about. I'm a teaching assistant in the Neuroscience of Learning course at Harvard Extension School. We've offered that course online only, in person, and as a hybrid online in-person option. And I put this picture of the brain there on purpose so you'd think I was smart. Research shows if you show a picture of the brain, people will think you're smarter. Steal that. I was also an advisory panel for the Neuroscience in the Classroom course. This is a free online course. If you're interested in the topic, go check it out. And I am a Montessori mentor and coach, which means I work with big people and with little people, and I publish educational information all the time. So my family has a lot of children and two of my own. My husband is also an educator, so we live and breathe education at our house. You can imagine how we torture our children at the dining room table. I care about education, so I care about the brain. And the brain itself never stops changing. This is good news for many of us. The brain is shaped as a result of both biology and experience. And you can see on the left, that little baby brain, when you're born, it's so much smaller. It has to fit in that little baby head, right? But it gets really big as we grow through life. And part of that happens just naturally, genetics drive it. And part of it happens as a result of the specific experiences that we have in our lives. Education is one of those experiences, and it can materially change the brain. Here's an example of what I mean by that. The LSAT is a test you have to take if you want to go to law school in the United States. If you want to get better at that test, you may take a little course that teaches you how to take the test. In this top graph, you can see that the scores go up before you take that little LSAT prep course and after. What also happens is that the neural connections in your brain change because of that training practice. You can see that in the bottom graph. So no pressure, but everything we do in education physically changes the brains of our students, okay? Here's how it happens. Here's an example of what the baby brain looks like over on the left. And you can see there are all these little black circles are the neuronal cell bodies. Those are neurons. Each one of these is a neuron. This is a little older, 2 years old, and this is 6-year-old over here. And you can see the difference is that there's not more neurons, not more black circles, but there are more skinny lines, more connections, okay? And we're growing connections all the time. That very overcrowded brain, and you can see it here in the middle. On the left, you got the baby brain, middle 7-year-old, and on the right is high school, adolescent brain, scared of that. And you've got this overcrowded situation in the middle here, and then you've got fewer connections over here. Now, is that what's going on in high schools, right? Teenagers, crazy? No, this is a normal, healthy process called pruning, and it's part of how plasticity works, part of how the brain changes itself. Think about it this way. When you're younger, you have to get down here from point A all the way up to point B. How are you going to get there? It's like a jungle. It's like a jungle. So you have to like hack your way through to find a path, all right? But as you go down that path, more and more and more, you refine the pathways, you strengthen it, and it's easier to go down. So those pruned pathways are more efficient than the overcrowded pathways. You can think of it as a trail as compared to a superhighway. One is a faster, directer connection, and that's what pruning does. Pruning means practice makes permanent. And my favorite educator, Maria Montessori, said, the mind is made by the work of the hands, and it's really true. It's really true. Whatever we do repeatedly changes the physical structure of our brain. Anything we do repeatedly, good, bad, or ugly. So like if we're always going for the cookie, right? Our brain gets really good at going for cookies. So if we want to develop good habits, we just need to do them repeatedly, and over time it will actually get easier. Our brain will like it more. Plasticity is this capacity of the brain to change. And when we're little, the brain changes really with little effort. So, you know, a little child sees or hears something once or twice. They're like a little recorder, right? And they repeat back everything you said at once. Oh my gosh, they know it. And they, you know, you're on the hook. And that's the state of the brain early in development. That's normal. That's how it works. As you get older, the natural capacity of the brain to change, the effortless capacity decreases. And you can see that in this graph. However, what you can still do is apply effort. So this blue line is showing you the amount of effort required to make changes in your brain, in your connections. And that's good and bad news. The good news is it's never too late. But the older we get, the more we must apply. And here's an example of this. If you've ever tried to put together a crazy Lego structure, you know for the 10-year-old it is effortless, and for the 50-year-old it is effortful. Not so easy. So think about where your students fall on this graph, and that'll give you some insight into how much effort they're going to need to apply to master the new skills or concepts that you're teaching. Because we do learn by doing, effort is essential. And think about this as if you are driving somewhere and you use GPS the first time, okay? So you're not paying attention, you're just driving, GPS tells you, go here, go here. The next time, are you going to be able to find it without the GPS? Have you ever been in that situation? If you're like me, maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. But when you're using GPS, you're passive. And when you're doing it with a map or thinking and remembering, you're active, okay? And active learning is much better for memory, for recall. This is why instructors must not be the center of attention, because then it's only the instructor who's learning, right? The students need to apply themselves. It's really important. And if you look in the brain, you can see why that's the case. Our movement areas are intrinsically connected with our thinking regions. They go hand in hand. Action, learning, they got to go together. Flipping the classroom is a great way to promote active learning. You should Google flipped classroom, learn more about it. This is like Web 2.0. When the web first came out, people were mostly passive consumers of the content on it, and as it has grown, people are now active contributors to the web, passive to active, just like with learning. In a flipped classroom, you have active learning in the classroom where students are doing many activities. Some of them are ideas for them are listed here, and also building relationships, instructor to student and student to student. You can see this is an example from our class, and see how happy we are? We're having a great time in class. It's great for relationship building. Why do we care about that? Because learning and feeling go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Here are two wonderful researchers in the field of emotion and cognition, Mary Helen Immordino-Yang and Antonio Damasio, and their theories show that emotion and cognition are not separate entities. We like to think, oh, keep your emotions out of learning, but in reality we can't, and they're essential for learning and mastering any topic. There's huge overlap. Students, for this reason, need to know who we are. Their emotions are already there and they're playing a role. We can acknowledge it or we can forget it and miss a huge potential for learning. So they want to know, are you on my team? Are we all together? They need to know that about the instructor and the student. And if you have an online course room, you can use discussion boards to present this and introduce yourself to the students. You can also use discussion boards to build peer-to-peer relationships. In any situation, online or in person, these relationships really matter for helping with that emotional aspect of learning. Modeling also matters. So here's some ideas for when you're on those discussion boards or if you have to give any feedback to the students. Let's say you get a paper that is not very good. All right, what are you going to say? You need to encourage the students so that they feel like they're in an emotionally safe place, but at the same time, you need to get them on the right path. Here are some possibilities for how you can have strengths-based, supportive comments, but still be actively guiding them in the right direction. More about why this modeling matters is in the story of mirror neurons, which I like to talk about. Potato chips. We'll get to potato chips in a minute. First, mirror neurons. So the scientist who kind of first figured out what was going on with this was working with the monkey, and the monkey was wired up. And the scientist was taking a little break. He had a little peanut, and the monkey wants the peanut. So the monkey starts going crazy, like he wants the peanut. So the scientist, big, dignified scientist, sticks out his tongue at the monkey, like this. Okay. So what does the monkey do? The monkey sticks out his tongue back at the researcher. What did they find out? When they looked at the results of in the brain, the monkey's brain, the same things were happening when the monkey saw the researcher stick out his tongue as when the monkey stuck out his own tongue. Same areas of the brain were becoming active. So this pointed to the biology of how we participate in each other. When we perceive that someone else is experiencing something, our brain experiences it in a similar way. And you can think about this with respect to potato chips. Imagine that it's about lunchtime and you hear somebody open a bag of potato chips, right? It might be in the other room, right? Hear it? And what happens to you? It's like you hear it. Oh my gosh, your mouth is watering. You're eating the chips. They're not even there, and you're eating the chips. That's your mirror neuron system working, okay? And that's how we participate in the experiences of others. That's why role modeling is so key. We become like those who are around us. We are all role models, and teaching is huge role modeling. And really, with respect to a stress response, this emotional aspect comes in because thinking suffers if you have a stress response. Now, what do I mean by a stress response? Let's say someone comes in and says, you're doing that wrong. And you kind of go, uh-oh. And you were criticized. You're not sure what to do. You made a mistake. Did I make a mistake? And what happens in your brain is this. Usually the thinking is out here on this outer area of the brain is kind of associated with our higher thinking area, particularly in the front. And the central area is focused more on an emotional response. The limbic system, amygdala, kind of safety, fight or flight is happening in there. What happens in this study by Arntzen, they found that your frontal areas actually lose regulation when you have a stress response. So literally, you can't think straight when you're having a stress response. And then at that very moment, what typically happens? Someone says, well, what are you going to do now, right? And you're like, I don't know. You can't quite come up with an answer. And that's because your prefrontal regulation has decreased. So think about this in terms of how we are interacting with our students. We don't want to cause a stress response. And also, if we notice that they're having a stress response for whatever reason, we need to allow a little time for them to just settle and re-establish that prefrontal regulation, which is what you need for great thinking. And when you think about, so you can share that information with your students, and that act of thinking about their own thinking, what happens when they experience that, is called metacognition. Thinking about your own stress response, thinking about thinking is metacognition. And metacognition improves learning outcomes when you learn how to think about yourself. Here's some ideas for how you can promote that with your students or with yourself. When you have to study, you can talk to them about, well, what kind of situations support your learning? When does your best learning happen? And have them think, oh, well, if my brother's running around, sword fighting, I can't study as well in that moment. So maybe I need to be in a room with a closed door. Or if I'm falling asleep, maybe I need a little nappuccino. Check out the research on that. That's fun. Before I'll be able to really focus. So have them think about what's physically happening in the situations when they're trying to learn and what they might do to support and improve those learning opportunities. As instructors, we also need to be connected and know what our students are thinking, right? This is to create this back and forth that we naturally do. We see something happening and we respond. We go faster, we go slower, we refocus our direction a little bit. That's called theory of mind, understanding what other people are thinking. If you're in an online course room, chat boards are a great way to encourage students to express what's going on with them, for you to understand their abstract thoughts. You can kind of get inside their brain. In the real classroom, encouraging dialogue is a great way to really hear what's happening in their thought process. Key about this is that learning is not linear. When they come back with information, you're like, that is totally out of left field. What are you talking about? Try to encourage rather than discourage and see where the connections are. And I'll tell you why. Because there are many paths to mastery. Not everybody goes from point A to B to C on the road to mastering a skill or a concept. They may go from D to F to G to X. It varies based on your own personal experience and history. What you bring to the table changes what you need in order to master a new skill or concept. And you will master things more effectively by repeated application of whatever it is that you're trying to do. Let me tell you what I mean. So here you are today, okay? And you're hearing about mind-brain education. Maybe this is the first time. Your knowledge, let's assume your knowledge level is kind of down here at the beginning. And then you're here and you're learning, you're going to talk about it a little bit. Your knowledge is going to really increase. But later today, you're going to go home. Someone's going to ask you, well, what'd you do today? What did you learn about? And you're going to be like, well, it was something about the brain, right? You won't be thinking mirror neurons or emotional learning. No, you'll just be like, something about the brain. But then, let's say you come back, right? You see some people who are here, you talk about it, you get a little support, you reapply yourself, and your knowledge level goes up. It's going to go down, up, down, up. Think about it this way. Right here, you're constructing your learning, okay? It has to fall apart a little bit, and then you reconstruct it, and your level goes higher. Deconstructs, reconstructs, deconstruct, reconstructs, all the way up on the road to mastery. And what's important to remember about this is that the regressions are as predictable as the progressions, okay? So you go up and you go down. You don't have to freak out when it seems like your students are losing a little bit. It just means a little more support and application to get them up to that next level. Now, traditionally in learning, we thought learning was linear, and it's because when you give someone a test, they might test down at that functional level much lower than that optimal level that you see with support. And that's why you may be in the classroom saying, my kids are doing great with this concept. They take a test and they bomb, right? That may be why. The functional level versus the scaffolded level could be what you're seeing. The classroom itself is a scaffold for them. If you're saying you're listening, you're learning something, and you're kind of looking off at something, when you are remembering it, you're going to have a cue from that thing you were looking at while you were processing. The people in the classroom are also a scaffold. You may have a quick side conversation with someone that brings out a salient point, maybe in a funny way. And that also supports your learning. So there are scaffolds all around us. And in the online environment, the physical environment, as well as the discussion boards, are scaffolds in a similar way. Now, allowing students to resubmit work gives them opportunities for that dynamic application. And it also gives you the chance to be really clear in what you're expecting of the students, so that you can slowly raise the bar for them. If they give you that first submission and it's crazy, you can still be accurate in how you respond to them and encourage them to resubmit as many times as is necessary for them to get to that level that you want them to be at. Attention and memory are everything when it comes to learning. What do I mean? You have a lot of different attention networks. Here are a few of them. First, there's an alerting network. You kind of say, what's most important? Like something happens, you have to pay attention to it. It weeds out the most important thing to look at. Then you have orienting attention, where you kind of say, there's a lot going on, I'm going to focus on this. And then you have executive attention, which is where you make decisions about where to persist in your attentional focus. What are you going to do next? Planning what's happening next. So think about alerting first. Just look at these two slides and let your eye just kind of follow. You've seen both of these earlier in the presentation. Which one does your eye fall on? The one with the image, right? So right away, a quick trick for you for alerting attention is to use more images and less text in your slides if you want to get student attention. Also, pay attention to what you want them to pay attention to. People will automatically first make eye contact. This is kind of the human way for most humans, and then follow what you're looking at. It's a natural human tendency. If you put your attention where you want theirs, it is a greater possibility that they will share it in your attentional focus. When you get to the orienting and executive attention networks, you really have to think about student interest, because this is where they have to persist. They have to say, this is most important and I'm going to continue. And generally we continue with what matters to us, right? We need a little personal motivation to go forward with it. It needs to apply to our life in some way. Now, sometimes our students are taking these courses because they're required to, sometimes they want to, sometimes it's a combination of both. If we can help them find their personal motivation and why this actually matters for their life, they will have a better possibility to persist in learning the new information and new skills. One great approach is to let students choose from options as far as the work assignments go. So what we've done in the Harvard course is we require that everybody watch the weekly video every week, but then they get to choose. We'll give several instructor picks, our favorite choices. They choose one of those, and then many additional resources, and they decide which one of those to follow up on. The great thing about this is that we discovered that students do way more when we present the information in this format. They scroll through and find out that they're interested in a lot of different things, and so they pursue more. If we only gave them two possibilities, that limits their potential. When you give them a lot, they have much more potential. And also this attention is going to guide their memory rehearsal and what we keep going through in our little working memory buffer. Let me talk about that. Memorizing and recalling is a process. It's not an instantaneous thing. It's not in one spot in the brain. First, we have to get information in through our senses, and then it comes in to the brain, and the brain says, okay, I already know this, so it's already in long-term memory, or this is new. And I have to kind of figure out if I care, does this matter, should I rehearse it in my working memory? The working memory is a buffer that keeps it going until it can consolidate into short and long-term memory. Working memory is essential for learning, and it's at the center of attention, memory, and executive functions. And multitasking is really an issue when it comes to working memory. So all of us are multitasking, right? That's our culture, and all around the world, we're doing everything at the same time, and it's completely impossible for the brain to manage this. The brain can't actually do many things at the same time. The brain goes one thing at a time, but what we do is we overload our working memory. So you've got 6 things going on, and then somebody comes in and says, oh, could I just, and you go, ah! And you're like, you're short, you're unskillful, you snap. And it's just because your working memory was really overloaded. So if you see that kind of situation for your students, you can slow down, let them finish and process what they're doing. Don't ask them to multitask if you want them to have their optimal learning potential. Processing time is super important for helping memory consolidation. Here's a story of how they discovered why. They had a little rat. He's wired up in the maze. He goes to point 1, they see point 1 get active in the brain. He goes to point 2 get active. Point 3 gets active. He gets to point 4. He stops, he sniffs, he scratches, pauses, and what happens? Point 4, 3, 2, and 1 all get active. So it was in the pause that the learning actually was processed. This is also known as the default mode network becoming active. So how can we help students take that pause during class? We have a lot to cover. Take a few minutes at the end of class for memory consolidation. In our Harvard course, we do this 3-2-1 where they just write down 3 things they learned, 2 things that they want to research more or share, and 1 thing that they're going to change about their personal practice or life because of what they learned. It's also quite useful for the instructor to see these notes because it'll let us know if we were really off base. If everybody's saying, oh, he taught X and we think we taught Y, we know we have to go revisit something. Sleep is super important for memory consolidation, and it's super important for intelligence and behavior. Let your students know and take it to heart yourself. So I hope you're getting the idea that we cannot think of the brain without also thinking of the biology of the entire body. Experience is wiring distant areas into effective connectivity networks in our brain. It's not just that we're all over here or we're all over here, we're all over everywhere. When you think about learning, you can kind of put it into 3 general networks. A recognition network that helps you notice what's happening. An affective network that is when you say, well, do I care what's happening? Do I care what's being taught? And then you have an executive or strategic network that decides, okay, where do I focus? How am I going to follow through? Should I persist on this? These neural networks vary from individual to individual, and they vary from culture to culture. Here's an example of that. On the left, you can see neural networks for reading in Italian and how they're different in reading in English. And those are similar languages, yet they use different brain areas. In languages like English and Chinese, the differences are more dramatic, logographic versus alphabetic. So I think you can see that to do anything, we need the entire brain. Here's an example for reading. This is the part that we use for reading. It's not one little part, it's the whole thing. You got to see it, you got to attach form, you got to find meaning, you got to respond, speak, or think about it. It's like a reading committee, right? Have you ever been on a committee? Nothing gets done. It's impossible. I don't know how the brain does it, but it does, right? But this is part of why we're so variable and diverse in our species. No 2 brains are exactly alike, just like no 2 faces are exactly alike. You can expect this variability to arrive into your learning environments. And like a good radio talk show host, gain some experience in managing all kinds of learning approaches. So now take a moment and think about what we've covered and just jot down which strategies you think are most relevant to you and how they relate to what you wrote down at the beginning of this video. And just for your reference, I have all the references that were cited throughout the slides. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward very much to hearing your questions.